Can you just read the credits so we can leave?
Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to FANTI, the podcast for all those complex and complicado conversations about the gray areas in our lives. I am journalist, author, and I had like some banshee shit I was going to say, but I'm not going to do it. Jarrett Hill.
Okay. And I'm Tre'vell Anderson. Welcome back to the show. For today's FANTI, we have a very special guest, okay, a member of the FANTI fam on to talk about representation and the potential dangers therein. Stay tuned for that. We also have an announcement coming later that you all will definitely want to listen to the end of the show to hear. Trust me. But first, we are going to do a Pass the Popcorn and talk about, listen, the Pinkett Smith household just won't let us go. And we find ourselves all up in their business once more. As you all know, I'm sure, Jada Pinkett Smith has her memoir coming out soon. Maybe it's already out by the time you hear this. I don't know. But we've been getting the kind of press, push around the book. And one of the tidbits that's come out that seems to have all of the girlies up in arms is about Will and Jada being separated since, I believe, 2016. Still legally married, not divorced, but being separated, and for all intents and purposes, it seems like living separate lives privately, but in various ways continuing at least the presentation of being together and happily married, I guess folks would say, in this time period since 2016. Obviously, major moments that have been part of that include, the boycott of the Oscars that Jada tried to keep going, partially related to Will's lack of nomination. One particular year, also she had some issues around Girls Trip not being recognized the ways that it needs to be recognized. Obviously, the slap heard around the world happened during this time period. And Jarrett, as the resident interrogator of traditional ideas and conceptions around relationships, I thought that I would be super interested in hearing kind of your thoughts about, what seems to be the people on the podcast can't hear what I'm saying and doing, but the people who can see, where I'm going with this. So go, Jarrett.
I've been really fascinated by this. And I keep hearing about all the backlash to Jada Pinkett Smith and how she's, people are mad at her and all this other stuff. And when we were talking about this in our meeting yesterday, I'm like, I have not been seeing that on social media. And that is not to say that I don't think it exists, but more so to say, I don't think I'm in community with a bunch of people who would be cussing her out or saying that she's wrong. I don't see it a lot in my feeds is more so what it is. My algorithm isn't bringing me that.
Lucky you.
But I also know that she's a Black woman in America, right? And and we've seen how that kind of backlash has looked over time. And so I have gone and seen some of it, but I'm not seeing it organically. But I do keep hearing people talk about them being tired of Jada or oh, I'm tired of being in their business. I'm tired of being in their bid. I'm tired of hearing their story. And I'm like, you don't say that when it's a Real Housewife of insert city here, right? And you be in their house. Right. And I think that Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith's relationship has been something that people have focused on so much that we've had a lot of investment in that relationship. And when I say we, I definitely mean Black culture has over the years had so much investment in their relationship. And now when they come out and talk about it, I should also say we've had so much investment in their relationship when they weren't really giving us much about it. Right. But now when they give it to us, it's oh, I'm so tired of hearing about this relationship because I think it's because it's not what we wanted to hear, right? Because it's not the beautiful thing that we imagined it was. It's not the standard, it's not the model of marriage that we want to hold up, right? This relationship that is perfectly monogamous and exactly the way that exactly the image that we've been giving year after year after year of them, but other couples. We've talked on this show before about Jay Shetty's book talks about how, so many of our conceptions about love come from the movies and from television. And quite literally, Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith are an example of that, right? Like, and from their real life and the ways that we've seen them portrayed. And so, like, I'm fascinated by the response to her speaking up over the years as she does in the last few years where we've gotten to see her on Red Table Talk. But I'm also like the response to it is just always really intriguing to me. I'm gonna let you jump in because I know you have something.
Well, I was gonna say I think there's something about what you're saying in terms of like people's, you know, the projections that people have made onto their relationship and what it means for the culture. You know, they are always one of the, you know, notable. Anytime somebody wants to do a Black love carousel for her Valentine's Day, right? They're definitely going to be in there as well as a what's her name? Pauletta? Is it Pauletta? Denzel Washington wife? Or is it Paula? But like, so I agree with that. But on the flip side, I do think that we have gotten a lot from these two about their household, their relationship over the last couple years. Now, what's different here, right, is like both Will and Jada are celebrities in their own individual right. They both have their own individual stories. That's why, right, a couple years ago, we got Will's book. Now we're getting Jada's book. And so I do think it is objectively that we are too much in their business, but we are in their business because each of them are celebrities, right? As opposed to one of them being a celebrity and the other one just being, you know, and I hate to say this, and I hope people don't, you know, this is no shade or no shot to, you know, the Washingtons, but if you're not in the theater world, you don't know Pauletta's, you know, impact in her work, right? But you do know Denzel Washington's, right? And we don't hear I think that we don't hear a lot about, you know, whatever ups and downs and shifts and whatnots that they have experienced. I think in part because Pauletta is not, you know, a major identifiable celebrity in her own right. And I say that because, right, we are also getting all of this information about whatever goddamn Kim Kardashian and the Kardashians are doing, whatever status of relationships, right, that they have. And I'm tired of their stuff too, for the record. And I do think that it is slightly different than the Housewives of Atlanta, or any of the housewives, right? Because there's a different level of celebrity, you know, there that I think makes us feel like, you know, knowing Nene's business is different than knowing, you know, Jada's business. That being said, though, the point you made, one of the things that popped up in our pre-production meeting is the great songwriter one.
Wait, can I tell them how it happened? Tre'vell and I we met in person yesterday because we had an interview here at my house for Fox, which will come at some point.
Local Fox, not Fox News. You know, you got to make a distinction now.
Now, come on now.
I'm just saying.
You know, good and goddamn well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, we're going to be on Tucker is not even on TV. Anyway, we're in the middle of conversation about pre-pro, and Tre'vell goes, ooh, ooh, ooh. And I'm like, I can see the progress bar is only at like 22%. And I'm like, can I help here, sis? Like, what exactly is happening? And you start typing in the computer and you arrive at...
I arrive at the seminal track from one Alicia Keys titled Unbreakable.
Uh-oh.
In which she's talking about Black love. She's talking about Black relationships. And she starts out saying we could fight like Ike and Tina, or give back like Bill and Camille, which, let's pause right there for this moment.
Wow.
My God, today.
What two couples? Wow.
Ooh.
Wow.
But let's keep going. She says be rich like Oprah and Stedman, or instead,
I'm here for it.
Struggle like Flo and James Evans. Okay, fast forward later in the song, she said, see, we could act out like Will and Jada, or like Kimora and Russell making paper.
Wow.
All in the family. Like, listen, the song has not aged well.
Kimora and Russell. I was gonna say, when you want to talk about a list of couples that has not aged beautifully, my God, today.
It's not great, but to your point, right? This stands, I think, as an example of the ways that we think about Will and Jada's relationship writ large, particularly in Black culture and Black love. And I do think that the more tidbits that we get about their relationship, the more they are humanized in a really interesting way to me, in a way that they should have always been, humanized, right? But like, it just strikes me as interesting. And yet I am also still so exhausted by all of the details coming out about their life, and more so all of the speculation and commentary around the details. I think more so.
I hear people saying like, oh, wow, we're too deep in their business. And like, I just find that so fascinating because like literally that list of people are all people from film and TV, right? Who we've in this song specifically kind of idolized their relationships as standards. And then like when we find out like the truth about those relationships, it's just kind of interesting to me the way that culture has responded to it, in that like we see people so frustrated with her in a way that they're not always frustrated with Will, which is interesting.
Well, that's misogynoir right there.
And then also because like I think about Rothanel's the comedy special from Gerard Carmichael on HBO. What I thought was so special about Rothanel was the way that we got to see honesty, right? Like we got to see like a telling of a story that is tragically relatable for a lot of people. Like, oh, I've been through that too. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to see my mom go through this with my dad, and for it to impact us in all these different kinds of ways. And like, because we've held up Will and Jada in this way over decades now, to hear like it's been 7 years and y'all haven't been together. And like 7 years ago, there was rumors in the grocery store on the front of the tabloid saying like Will and Jada not together, right? And people being like, I don't believe that shit. I believe it when they tell me, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And it's interesting to me that like, okay, now you get the truth of the situation, and like so many people are upset or frustrated. But I think like that's also because it's not what people imagined it to be. It's not the image that they held up. And like so many people are in relationships that they don't want to be in, or that don't feel the way that they want to feel in their relationships. And I think this challenges that. And it's like, oh, I've been trying to live up to a standard that wasn't even real. Right. I was trying to like, I've been holding up a model of something that these people who are in it are telling me it's not what you think it is. And so I just find that interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I agree that is like exactly what is going on here, because the reality is they've been separated since 2016. They have no intention of divorcing. They as they have said, over these last week or so. And so to me, I think it's yes, perhaps that this setup of a relationship does not match what the John Q. public thought or expected, or I would say the image that Jada and Will have maintained and put out there publicly for consumption, right? But also, why can't this be the new Black? Like why can't a person be, and let's be real, we know of plenty of people in everyday life who are still legally married to their husband, wife, partner, but have been separated. That's why when you file your taxes, you can do separated but not divorced.
Exactly. Yes.
It's that prevalent that it is an option on your IRS forms. You know what I mean? But I do think that there's something about their relationship transitioning to this current iteration that is interesting, and the fact that though we are not owed as the public any information about what they do in their personal lives, right? There is a really interesting coming to Jesus moment that I think the community is now having with many of these images of Black love. Last thing I'll say is it also is interesting, and I think why people are also a little bit exhausted with the Pinkett Smith household in this, or I don't even know if they still live in the same house, who knows? But them people, is because there's also this added element of the capitalistic pursuits that is tied to this era of quote unquote honesty. Right? Because let's be real, she's pushing a fucking buck.
Yeah.
She wants this thing to sell. You know what I mean? And holding on to those personal tidbits and then divulging them, not in Will's book. There is information about their relationship ups and downs in Will's book, but this information specifically was not in Will's book. And so I would say in my head, somebody had a conversation about, what about our relationship are you going to put in your book? What about our relationship can I put in my book if I decide to do one at that time, assuming she wasn't at that particular time, and how that contributes to the broader, promo ecosystem around these things. Anyway, we could talk about this on and on and on, and I'm sure, many people will continue doing so, but we are going to take a quick break, okay? And when we come back, we will have our FANTI discussion with the one and only Dr. Dyette. We will be right back. A Queer History of Aerospace is a new audio miniseries from the Museum of Flight premiering October 24th. Located in Seattle, Washington, the Museum of Flight is the largest private, nonprofit air and space museum in the world. A Queer History of Aerospace explores the ways the LGBTQ+ community has shaped aviation and space exploration and the ways the industry has impacted the LGBTQ+ community. The ultimate goal they have is to encourage people who have been left off museum walls to share their own histories so that together we can start telling the whole story.
As I think about my own personal connection to aerospace, the first thing that comes to me is thinking about my first time flying on an airplane as a little kid. And long story short, I threw up in my grandmother's lap as a baby. And I've heard that story a million times now. And welcome to flight. If you want to check out A Queer History of Aerospace, there are many ways that you can do that, but we ask that you go listen at museumofflight.org/podcast or search The Flight Deck on your favorite podcatcher. New episodes are every Tuesday beginning October 24th. Welcome back to FANTI. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the conversations happening around vulnerability that comes along with visibility and the dangers that can come along with representation, or at least the challenges. I've been processing the various ways that we've seen this happen in recent years, even from a big picture perspective. 3/4 of a score and about 20 pounds ago, a Black man was elected president of the United States. I appreciate that y'all appreciated that. One day shy of a month after Barack Obama's inauguration, the Tea Party was founded, and one president later, another white supremacist took office over the seat that Obama had occupied historically for 8 years. White people were mad, backlash. I think Van Jones called it a white lash on the night of the election. In 2014, Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine with the headline, "The Transgender Tipping Point," indicating a significant moment for the representation of trans people in mainstream culture. The following spring, Obergefell v. Hodges would bring the question of marriage equality to the Supreme Court. In that 2015 summer, gay and lesbian people were granted the right to marry. Since, we've seen a massive swell in anti-LGBTQIA+ legislation, and hate crimes against the community around the country have spiked. I want to warn you that Tre'vell gave me this last example, and you can do with that information what you will. In 2003, the Velvet Teddy Bear, Ruben Studdard, said sorry for 2004 after he became the second winner of American Idol and the first Black winner. Later, in 2004, Fantasia said sorry to this woman when she beat Diana DeCarmo, becoming the third American Idol and the first Black woman to win. White people said no more after that. immediately throwing it back to whiteness with country music and Carrie Underwood. Let's be honest, though, Carrie Underwood goes in, and our guest joins us after offering us just a little brief bit of feedback in previous episodes that we've done, specifically on propaganda most recently. She asserted how representation in propaganda can be directly harmful or at least less than useful. So we thought she'd be perfect for this conversation. So joining us is licensed clinical psychologist and registered health service provider, but more importantly, veteran member of the FANTI fam, known for her brevity and thoughtful analysis. Please welcome Dr. Kassara Dyette back to FANTI. Welcome.
Hey, Dr. Dyette.
Thank you for having me. Y'all forever dragging me for being long-winded, but
listen, I love it because it's always so thorough.
Not long-winded, comprehensive.
It's always thorough, right? Like, and I love a good analysis. It's hard on a podcast sometimes, but I enjoy it. So like, go in. That's why we have you here. So thank you so much.
It's the Virgo in me.
I want to kind of get started with you sent us a voice note before after our propaganda episodes, and one of the pieces that you talked about was how when we have representation and visibility in certain places, it's not always helpful. Or it can also have a bit of a backlash, right? And kind of the examples that I cited earlier, including American Idol. I would love for you to kind of unpack how you were thinking about how propaganda and Blackness being paired together can be a challenging dynamic.
Sure. So most people don't know this because it's not something I talk about, obviously, when I'm writing into the podcast, but I work in the juvenile court system in Massachusetts. So I'm pretty regularly interfacing with the criminal justice system. And when I was writing in, I was specifically thinking about the fact that, like, when we show up on these shows, it feels cool in the moment, but then it's just another way that we are being shown as embedded in the system in ways that maybe don't always play out in real life. And also, oftentimes there are other things that the main protagonist is complicit to that doesn't ever get addressed. And so when I wrote and I was thinking about, like, yeah, representation is nice, but then is it nice if it's propaganda in this specific instance? Especially if we're making the argument that these kinds of shows are actually not good or propaganda adjacent shows, as you guys were talking about.
Yeah, this is interesting to me because I feel like this thought of, like, can representation be dangerous? Particularly in the propaganda example, right? Shout out to Dana Owens, Queen Latifah, and The Equalizer, and, all of the other examples that we've listed. But your point about how the use of a black face, right, to represent what essentially is a harmful white system, and that being something that we in this era are supposed to applaud, right? We're supposed to applaud Niecy Nash fronting her own show as a cop. We're supposed to applaud, there's a new one. I haven't seen the show, but somebody told me about this new show called Found, which stars this black woman who is, like, trying to find, like, missing children, missing people or whatever. And so it's, like, adjacent to the cop sphere in that particular way. But we're supposed to applaud these instances of, representation and diversity. But to your point, when you sit down and you look at it just a little bit more deeper, you're like, oh wow, black people are actually just being used to try to, indoctrinate people into thinking that these systems are, like, good for us, when the reality is they're not. I also think of, when we were pre-producing, I was thinking of Lori Lightfoot out in Chicago, black lesbian, power to the people representation, but according to the community, she fucked some things up while she was in office, right? And wasn't necessarily a net positive. Also thinking of LaFonza Butler, first black lesbian to be, serving in what is it, the Senate and the Senate, and how, you know, we've seen the ways that Black people, folks of color, trans people, etc., find themselves in the political system, even trying to push back against things, but end up still being in so many ways tools of the state. I say all that to say, does that then mean that, you know, representation does not matter, or that we should just be having a deeper, different conversation about representation? Like, how do you square, Dr. Dyette, that reality with kind of the utility of representation nonetheless?
Yeah, well, I would never say that representation doesn't matter. But I do think what you said, the latter, which is that we need to be having a deeper conversation about what that means and the implications of that, is important, especially because specifically working in the juvenile court, I'm seeing children and adolescents. And when I'm doing therapy or assessments or anything like that, how they learn is through play, through what they're seeing on TV. Mm-hmm. And kids play out all of these things. Even if they're picking up charges, you know, we're asking, like, where are you watching? Where did you hear it from? Where did you see this? Mm-hmm. And so the impact of representation is something we need to talk about. And also, y'all say this all the time, but it's like, because there's not enough representation, we get kind of squeezed in wherever we can be represented, rather than having more opportunities to create something that might be, I guess, more thoughtful. And I'm not saying these shows aren't, but at the same time, you know, it's following a very old line of propaganda. And I grew up on those shows. I mean, that was part of the reason why I was like, okay, I want to work with my people. I want to help them. And it wasn't anything like what I thought it was going to be. I think the impact of that is something that we need to be thinking more about. Not necessarily that it's not important.
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this kind of through the lens. We're talking about how we see Black folks show up in propaganda and how that can impact community and how it can not necessarily always be helpful. And when we were meeting yesterday, one of the things that came up was like, a lot of the challenges around representation have to do with like backlash and response to said representation. Right. And like when white people have seen like Black people making gains, right, the ways that the response to that shows up. But also that's not only like with race and those different kinds of things. We've obviously talked about this with gender. We talked about it with sexuality. We talked about it with feminism. And over the years, we talked about it with all kinds of different things, right? There's always like some kind of response to it. I think about this in our industry as well, as we're going through the strike, as it continues to linger on and like kind of drag on for SAG-AFTRA. And as we're seeing Hollywood go through the moment that we're going through, where we've seen so much more representation, right? As far as like seeing black faces on screen, I start to think about like in this moment now, like we're going to see I would imagine over the next 2 to 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see a lot less by comparison, because so many Black executives have been laid off in this strike. So many Black actors their shows have not been renewed. The writers, the creators, the actors, the directors, all of those folks that are doing that work. And so many of the people that we've seen come into the industry in the last few years because of this like growth of representation, I'm curious about like what it's going to look like for us in the coming years. How do you think about those kinds of responses that we see from representation and the ways that they impact the movements that we've seen over the years?
For clarification, when you say responses, what do you mean exactly?
Well, like when we look at the example that we used at the beginning was Donald Trump and Barack Obama. We saw like Barack Obama come into office and be such a major moment in our history, and the response to that a month later was the beginning of the Tea Party. We saw how white supremacy grew and rose in all kinds of major ways, and then Donald Trump was the next president after that, right? When we think about the example we used with Laverne Cox with the transgender tipping point and the ways that we saw like the growth of trans representation, we also saw like an influx of legislation that came in after the transgender tipping point and same-sex marriage being legalized. We saw like the response to that was a lot of backlash as well. And when we're seeing so much more representation within media, when we're seeing it in all of these other different kinds of places, where we have a Black woman as vice president, we have like a lot of different places that we've seen growth and representation. What is it about that kind of representation that like awakens something in folks that they start to respond back in such a negative way?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? But I mean, we know why to some degree, which is that representation, even if it's one more than the token, then it's a threat because it's not what we were prescribed. We were told there can only be one of you, and now there are too many of y'all showing up. And so for the people for whom that was the permission that we were given, especially with Trump, right? We were seeing in the literature, especially for the people who are doing this research, the psychology research, that significantly negatively impacted our discourse. And that's not just something that people are saying, right? We're actually able to show this. And what he was saying is like, these people shouldn't be here. Y'all were asleep. And look how many Black people are over here. Look how many Mexican people are over here. Like, and he was basically stoking a fire that was already there. Even though we know that this kind of bigotry and racism and xenophobia and fill in the blank hurts everyone. It hurts everyone. But that doesn't matter if there is the illusion of I'm losing power somehow because there are more of y'all here than they should be. And that's what's been stirred up in people, even though the reality is that most of us suffer when there's this kind of backlash to representation.
I'm also kind of thinking about, I feel like we often have the conversation, this conversation around representation, and we talk about the kind of community or broader social response to representation, i.e. all of those examples Jarrett already listed. I'm also thinking about one of the comments that I believe you've also made before in writing to the show is about the cost of representation, or like being that person for the actual person who is it, right? So I think of, the cost that it has been for Laverne to be the face of transgenderism in America, and or the cost of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, right, being the first Black, president and first lady. The cost that it might come for LaFonza Butler to be the first Black lesbian, first woman of color, queer woman of color, if I'm not mistaken, in the Senate in that position. And then now, right, if she decides to run for that position, to then be up against Miss Mama's. What's Miss Mama's name, Jarrett?
Oh, honey, you host What a Day, not me. I don't be in the news now.
The one who's here in California and is running for that position that they wanted. Anyway, y'all know who I'm talking about. Y'all know who I'm talking about out there in the streets. I forget her name. Not Karen. Karen's the mayor, not Karen. The other older Black woman. Anyway, it don't matter. But, she's running for that seat, right, for the election next year. But Gavin Newsom, for whatever different reasons, didn't appoint her to this temporary position. If LaFonza Butler, right, the first Black lesbian to be in the Senate, decides that she doesn't just want to hold the seat warm, and she decides that she wants to run to keep that position, then now she's pitted against this other Black woman, right, who has already thrown her hat in. And so this is a long way of me, trying to get at the point of, what the costs look like, how representation can be this negative thing for the person who actually has to walk that path, who actually has to blaze that trail, and what it can look like for Laverne, right, to usher in the transgender tipping point, quote unquote, in 2014, and less than a decade later, right, see the ways that the world and in particular here in the United States, conservative legislatures, the Supreme Court, etc., are trying to tip us back the other way. Could you speak to just, I guess, kind of the impact that type of thing might have on an individual?
That particular What Was Said episode hit me really hard because I ever since y'all started doing the show, I was like, this is so needed. And also, I had a feeling but didn't quite know until it was said, especially by Palmyra, like what y'all were receiving on your end, particularly you, Tre'vell. As you were doing your show, I was also starting my social media presence as well. And I started like my Instagram and all of that because I was seeing other clinicians online just sharing inaccurate information. And so I was like, I don't really want to do this, but I feel like if I'm sitting over here being like, oh, this is wrong, but I'm not going to say anything, it's never been in my spirit to just complain on the side and not do anything. But when I was first trying it, I'm speaking about myself for the moment before I expand, but I was trying all kinds of different things. Like I tried the snappy videos and all kinds of posts. And there was one that I did that was like a parody during Black History Month, talking about how, of course, they gave us the shortest month. And it was a joke. And also it was a commentary on how dumb it is that we have months for just representing specific groups of people rather than us thinking about this all the time. But people responded really negatively to that video. Like it just went around fast. And I was getting death threats in my inbox. Some of them from folks who are either active duty or veterans. And I remember sitting with that, being like, wow, like I'm actually trained to work with that population. So complex trauma, PTSD, like, and so to get that from people who I would normally be helping was an interesting sort of experience just because of this thing. And I actually took a couple months off because I was just like, do I want to do this? Do I have the stamina to deal with what it means to try to expand representation while also presenting accurate information and potentially being misunderstood, because that's always going to happen. But also some people are dedicated to misunderstanding you, right? That is, they don't want to understand you. It doesn't matter how much you explain yourself. And you have to figure out, if we're just talking about the general impact, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but is how can I show up as consistently and authentically myself while also protecting important pieces of me? How do I serve the people I want to serve and represent the voices I want to represent without completely sacrificing everything? Because at some point you have to keep something for yourself. And that's the only way you're going to survive being so public facing, especially when it comes to diversity and social justice work, because there will always be the people who are dedicated to misunderstanding you, and in some ways violently so. And the impacts are not just psychological, but also real physical safety. Worrying like, where, what address is listed online? If I have this in the background, can somebody find me? You hear all of these stories about people being tracked down by folks who just didn't like something that they said. And so it's not just a psychological thing, it's real danger when we choose to do this work.
Can we hang out here for another second? I'm always really fascinated, feels like a weird word to use here, but whenever things like a major moment happens, right, positive, negative, funny, ridiculous, whatever, like there are always death threats that follow that for the person in the center of it. And it's always been so weird to me. Like, I'm going to kill you is the response. Like when Melania happened, I got some hate DMs and stuff like that. I didn't get like a ton of it, but there was some. And I'm like, what is that response about? Like, what is, we're talking about like fear and all these different kinds of things. But like now hearing like you also receiving death threats coming through the lens that you have, obviously as a clinician, like how do you think about when you see people responding with, I'm going to kill you?
I'm not saying anything that other people haven't said, but it's the disembodied nature of the whole thing. That you're less of a person because you're not in front of this person who is sending you the death threat. And most of the time, well, I don't want to use most of the time, but I think for a good percentage of the time, you may not have to worry that someone is actually going to act on it. But there is always that smaller percentage who might and who do. And so it's already the fact that you're less of a person because of who you are and what you represent. And then add on top of that, there's no direct communication where you can sit in front of one another. So if we're talking about how much less of a person you can be, if I use myself as an example, I'm a Black queer woman, right? I'm an immigrant. People can see all of that. I can't hide it. And there are some things I choose not to hide. And also, they don't know who I am. They only see this video. I just popped up. They know nothing else about anything else about me. And it's easy to threaten someone who does not feel like a person to you.
This reminds me of and we spoke about this yesterday as well, Jarrett, in my book, We See Each Other, Black Trans Journey Through TV and Film. But, you know, I talk about, specifically when it comes to like trans representation, right? This like, particularly over the last decade, immense increase in visibility that we've experienced, but then to also be living through this particular moment where the anti-trans legislation, which primarily is targeting, you know, trans women and girls, it means that visibility ends up being a paradox for us as a community. Insofar as, yes, it allows us to see ourselves and be seen and access all of these various possibilities of how we can show up in the world. And also it makes us targets for the people who hate us. And to the point you just made, Dr. Dyette, many of those people, I can only assume, don't see us as human, don't see us as deserving protection and care and rights. And that is what allows them to, you know, stare in our face, you know, from the Supreme Court bench and say, you know, you can't play certain sports, or you can't use, you know, certain bathrooms, or whatever the case may be. Or, you know, you can't do what the hell you want to do with your body as it relates to your reproductive health, right? And it is really wild, I think, when you can articulate that behavior as a result of, you know, the ways that these people are ultimately dehumanizing you. Because then it to me at least, it shifts the conversation from just being, oh, these people, we just like have these ideological differences, to, you actually don't think that I'm human at all. So it goes beyond the ideology difference per se to like some other permutation of whatever, of identity, in this way that I think makes the work of representation that much more important, at least for me. Dr. Dyette, you were going to say something?
So there are a couple things, but one is, you just made me think about, and I was just having this conversation with someone, like, and I'm talking basic, like, do you know what I do with my hair? Mm-hmm. Do you know what my skincare routine is? Like, fill in the blank, right? Like, I always knew what white people did with their hair. But my first white roommate was like, oh, you only wash your hair once a week? That's disgusting. And it may seem like a very silly example, but like, it's even imagining us in our day-to-day is something that some people can't do, which adds to that less human experience. And on the flip side, because I know we're talking about some of this is like those people out there, when you said Supreme Court, I thought about good old Clarence.
Girl.
And
not good old Clarence.
Well, and the amount of internalized racism that is a part of the decisions that he is making. When you hear his story, that's trauma. That's trauma. That's deep self-hatred.
Absolutely.
We also get into positions of perpetuating the humanlessness because of hatred of ourselves, which also goes to some of the colorism stuff that y'all have talked about as well. And that there are many ways in which we are complicit in reinforcing even the lack of humanness of our own groups of people. And there's many layers to this that's not just us and them, but also internalized them and how that's operating on us.
As you started talking about like our day-to-day, like the practical elements of like how we show up in the world on such a granular level, I immediately thought of like the opposite. And I remember someone talking about how white people didn't include black people in science fiction. Like they don't even see us in their dreams, right? And what they imagine and what they create. And like how black folks have like broken into science fiction in different kinds of ways. And like the way that made me think about like so many different things within media. You're the granular piece that you gave us about shampoo or about how we wash our hair and how those things show up in practice is just such an important piece that I'm still going to be chewing on. We're at time, and I really, really want to thank you for being here with us today. Talk to folks about where they can connect with the work that you're doing on social media and everywhere else.
If you want them to.
If you want them to, and how to not send you crazy ass messages, okay?
Well, I am everywhere except, what are we calling it? X? Is that what the...
I guess.
I refuse. So I am on TikTok at Dr. Dyette, Dr. Dyette. I'm on Instagram, CTC Consulting. I have a website as well. Cup of Tea Counseling is my, and consulting is my business, so ctcconsulting.org. And you can always send a message there or through Instagram. I have a wonderful admin working with me. Her name is Ella, so she always handles my messages. And I will be actually putting out some coursework soon for therapists who want to learn how to be better therapists. So,
okay,
love this.
Anyone who's maybe looking for decolonized support around their work. So that's going to be something that I'm launching in November. So you can find me on all those platforms.
Love that. Also, I don't know if I said this on the pod already, but Dr. Dyette came to my book stop a few weeks ago. And she was amazing. I also was amazing, but she was amazing.
You were fabulous. You were fabulous. Possibility model.
Thank you so much. And so shout out to you for always supporting you and what's the other person? Is it Addison?
Oh, Dr. Tucker.
Alistair. Who are always super supportive, showing up. We love y'all. Thank y'all so much for the love.
Absolutely. Dr. Dyette, thank you so much for your long-term commitment to the show and like being so tapped in and supportive and loving over the years. Like it really means a lot. So thank you. We want to hear from y'all. Hit us up on social media using the hashtag FantiFam. We're on the Twitter X, the Instagram, the TikTok, and the YouTube at FanTi Podcast. Coming up, why y'all hate us so much, and listener feedback, and our dishonorable mentions. We'll be right back.
All right, class. Tomorrow's exam will cover the science of perfect pitch, the history of pride flags, and speedrunning video games. Any questions? Yes, you in the back.
What is this?
It's the podcast Let's Learn Everything,
Where we learn about science and a bit of everything else.
My name's Tom. I study cognitive and computer science, but I'll also be your teacher for intermediate emojis.
My name's Caroline, and I did my master's in biodiversity conservation, and I'll be teaching you intro to things the British Museum stole.
My name's Ella. I did a PhD in stem cell biology, so obviously I'll be teaching you the history of fan fiction.
Class meets every other Thursday on Maximum Fun.
So do I still get credit for this?
No.
Obviously not.
No.
It's a podcast.
Hi, I'm Bikram Chatterjee, the CEO of Maximum Fun, and I'm here with my fellow worker owner,
Marissa Flaxbart, producer. This week for Co-Optober, we'll be highlighting other co-ops who work in the arts.
The past few years have been challenging for all kinds of creative industries. We at Max Fun believe that co-ops are better suited to meet these challenges, and there are a lot of other companies who feel the same way.
So all this week on our social media and website, we'll be sharing interviews with some of our fellow co-ops.
And head to our YouTube channel Friday, October 20th, where I'll be talking with worker owners from Defector and Stocksy about their co-ops and why the model works for them.
And next week is Volunteer Week. Learn how you can participate in that and get details on exclusive merch, our live streams, and other Co-Optober happenings at MaximumFun.org/Co-Optober.
That's COOPTOBER.
Welcome back, beautiful people. We're going to get into our listener feedback segment. We've got an email here from Elisa, and they say, having just listened to your episode on the 50th anniversary of hip-hop, I was really struck by what incredible interviewers Tre'vell and Jarrett are, and I wanted to write in to commend you both on that. I know that it's part of your job, but even so, your particular excellence in this aspect of your work stands out. I listen to a lot of podcasts that feature interview formats, and I can truly say that there is a wide gulf in quality between the two of you, and even the next best interviewer in my podcast library. It's such a particular skill that gets so often overlooked by the general public, and the two of you make it look so easy. So I want to make sure that you get your flowers for such a well-cultivated talent.
I'm sure there's someone who just listened to our last interview and like loved it, and there's somebody who hated it, and someone will be like,
well, fuck them.
oh, now I'm hearing about how great an interview is. Thank you for this. I appreciate this email. It's very encouraging to hear. So thank you. Now it's time for our dishonorable mentions. These are the stories of people who caught our attention this week that deserve a call out either for their good or for their stupid. Tre'vell, get us started.
All right. I just have one quick shout out. I had the opportunity to be on the BFF Experience, which was the podcast live show for the Black Fat Femme podcast, which Dr. John Paul and Jordan Daniels, Joho for short, host. They did a live podcast show here in LA on National Coming Out Day. I was on the panel alongside friend of the pod, Shar Jossel, as well as XD. And it was cute. It was a lot of fun. Check out that. I believe they recorded it, so that episode will be coming out on their feed in a week or so. So be sure to check them out. That's it for me.
All right. I want to give a shout out to Laura Coates over at CNN. I have not watched CNN in a while. Let's just call a spade a spade. I don't really watch CNN anymore. Not like a principled thing. It's just not, I haven't been watching it. There hasn't been like shows on CNN that I've really been interested in. But I saw her debut on CNN in the reflection on someone else's screen. And I was like, is that? And I was looking, and her show is called Laura Coates Live, and it is themed after Larry King Live. And the thing that I saw in the reflection was the map made of dots in the background. And I was like, oh, that's like Larry King. Oh, it's called Laura. Oh, and like went and turned it on, and she also had on like suspenders as a bit of a reference as well. And so I ended up watching the whole show, and I just want to give a shout out to the folks that put together this show. There were so many references for your first episode on Monday that I appreciated, and just wanted to give a shout out to a brand new show. There are two Black women back to back in primetime on CNN, Abby Phillips and Laura Coates, and I really enjoyed the show. So shout out to her. Y'all can check out Laura Coates Live on CNN, whatever time it was last night that I saw it. And so that is going to be that. It's now time for
Black history is happening every day. So at the Artistic Gymnastics World Championships in Antwerp earlier this month, U.S. Olympian Simone Biles made history again by becoming the first woman ever to land the Yurchenko double pike. This move is so dangerous that Biles voluntarily took a half-point deduction so that her coach could stand on the mat as a safety precaution.
Ow.
The move is now called the Biles 2, and with that win, it adds to 25 World Championship medals, 19 of which are gold for the 26-year-old athlete. This is the same city where Biles won her first World Championship a decade ago, and she already has 4 other skills named for her: 2 on the floor exercise, 1 on the balance beam, and another on the vault. In case you don't know, skills in gymnastics are named for the person to perform them first successfully perform them first at a major international competition. And so the fact that she now has 5 moves named after her, listen, bad bitches beware, okay?
Listen, just another day for a bad bitch. What I tell you?
Listen, big purr. And you know what? I love this because, Simone Biles, she took a little break off. She was like, you motherfuckers are doing too much. I'm going to go over here, mind my mental health, go marry my man.
Yes.
And then come back and own the floor. And guess what?
And remind you hoes exactly who I am. You can throw that on the pile of the other ones because, it's just amazing. I love Simone Biles, so congratulations. All right. Before we go, we've got a little bit of an announcement that we had promised at the top of the show. Tre'vell?
Yes.
I feel like I should.
Why? What you trying to say?
Well, because we actually didn't talk about how we would do this. But, go ahead. Go ahead, since you're just so adamant. Go ahead on.
The problem is, I just know I have it, but I just shoot from the hip, okay, and try to be gentle more. That's one of my New Year's resolutions, perhaps.
You?
Anyway,
it's October and she's bombing, but go ahead.
Anyway. Okay, so as you all know, we have been doing FANTI for 4 years now, 4 fabulous seasons. If I said that and you were like, what? 4 seasons? That means you're not one of the OGs, and you need to go back and visit, this wonderful good that we have been providing you all for 4 years. But the time has come for us to lay FANTI to rest.
Lip sync for our lives?
Cut it out. Cut it out. This is supposed to be serious.
Sorry, go ahead.
The time has come for us to lay FANTI to rest after a fabulous 4 years. And so we will be ending this fabulous show by the end of the year. We have 10 wonderful episodes planned that will take us through the end of December, and we hope that you all will stick along for the ride as we get to end this the way we want to, having the conversations we want to with the people that we want to, as we prepare for what else the universe has in store for us.
We have a lot of other things planned coming up, going out into the world, even post this. And so we'll have other things that we'll have coming up that we'll talk to y'all about in coming weeks and months. But it's been a real pleasure to have this idea to do something and to bring it to life in this way, and for it to be able to build us a community of people and to offer so many other opportunities. So we're incredibly grateful for that. Did you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, but like I said, we ain't done yet. So don't go removing us from your little feed yet now, okay?
We made the decision that we wanted to tell y'all when we still have plenty of time left for the show to, come to a landing. I have worked on many shows, and over the years, like, shows get canceled, they don't get renewed, they lay off people, all kinds of different things happen. So I'm really grateful to be able to land this plane in the way that we want to. And as we're counting down to these last 10 episodes, we'd love to hear from you all, from the FANTI fam. And if you'd like to kind of share what this experience has been like. We started off talking, we had an ad earlier talking about aerospace, but like, as we're talking about landing this plane, we'd love to get to hear from you all. So if you want to send us was that not good? Was it not as good as I thought it was?
It's not that it wasn't good. I just wasn't necessary.
It wasn't necessary, but I'm like, I'm talking about a plane and we just read an ad. We want to hear from y'all. You can send us a voice memo to the show, and we'll be including those in our upcoming final 10 episodes of FANTI. You can go to speakpipe.com/FANTI, and we'll include that link in our show notes. But you can send us a voice note and let us know about what it's been like to be a part of the FANTI fam.
Yes, and we will, like we said, we have 10 really good episodes coming down the line. Don't go anywhere. And we will dive more into, the details around why we're ending and all of that in the shows to come. Don't worry. But yes, share with us some of your thoughts, your feelings about, being part of the FANTI fam, what you've loved, maybe a little bit of what you hated. I guess we can open that as well. Go to speakpipe.com/FANTI. We'll include that link in the show notes, and hopefully be able to incorporate some of you all's thoughts into, our swan song, as they say.
We thank y'all so much for listening. If you're checking us out on YouTube, you can go to FANTIPodcast.com. Check out those past 4 seasons that Tre'vell was talking about. We've got a lot more than just the episodes online. FANTIPodcast.com. If you have a comment or suggestion about this week's show, you can go to speakpipe.com/FANTI, or you can hit us up on the social media at FANTI Podcast on Instagram, the X/Twitter, and TikTok, and also on YouTube. You can email us, fanti@maximumfun.org, and we'll maybe include your email in an upcoming show as well.
And, special shout out to all of the folks who are financially contributing members of the FANTI fam. If you would like to support the work that our network does, if you want to give us a little extra couple coins on our way out, you can go join at maximumfun.org/join. As always, our music is brought to you by Corey, COR.ECE, wherever you get Slay-worthy music. He also just had a birthday, so shout out to him. Our graphics are by Ashley Wynn and folks over at Moonhouse Creative. Our editor is Anne-Marie Huber, and our producer is Palmira Muniz.
And our senior producer is Laura Swisher. This is a production of Maximum Fun.